If you've been playing games for a while, you probably already had discussions about the medium with someone considering its nature as art. What was the point when a certain game made you realize that video games are in their own league when it comes to artistry? What game made you see, hear, feel something so special that it basically changed your perception about the whole art form? And what was that special sensation? It's probably something from your childhood, a charming experience with a unique feel that you never experienced in your life before. Something your nostalgia is feeding on to an unhealthy extent, right? As gamers, we all share experiences that kickstarted our passionate consumption and love of interactive media. Sometimes, however, this nostalgia can be a deceiving factor, especially when someone ends up replaying a 20-year-old classic that they haven't touched since its release. This love and nostalgia are what HD remastered versions are founded upon. Some of them end up becoming great, while others are But what if a game holds up so incredibly well that you can basically keep replaying it throughout the years and still find enjoyment in it? That's when the reveal of a full remaster hits you in the head, leaving you with mixed feelings. You can probably already see where I'm trying to go with this, right? Homeworld is my favorite video game of all time. A gigantic masterpiece when it comes to PC gaming, serving as the first strategy game which was able to simulate a fully 3D space with 360 degrees of freedom when it comes to unit movement, in 1999. Homeworld for me isn't just a technically and mechanically cutting-edge relic of its time, however. Relic. But it's also one of the most beautiful and tragic video game journeys I've ever experienced in my life. I was mortified by the thought of a review of this game at first, but on the other hand, it's one of those extremely important games that not many people seem to give enough credit to, even with a semi-recent remastered version that was made by Gearbox of all companies. It also got a prequel developed by Blackbird Interactive, who are currently working on Hard Space Shipbreakers, and also Homeworld 3. After almost 20 years, Homeworld is going to get a third installment. With its semi-recent reveal in mind, I feel like I'm comfortable enough to tell you about this game in a review format. But in the end, when we are done with the technicalities, I would like to go off a bit about why this game and this series as a whole is of importance to me. I'm doing this as a means to help you understand why my dysfunctional and sometimes dumb brain grown to love this art form through a strategy game, even though he basically dismissed the entire damn genre for a long time. I don't like strategy games that much, so it can only be the crown jewel of my imperfections that my favorite game is an RTS, which I'm going to talk about in a hopefully detailed manner while comparing the remastered version to the original, judging it harshly. So the few RTS games I actually played have some common traits that Homeworld doesn't seem to have. Whenever I think of Warcraft 3, or even Empire Earth for instance, I always think of character-oriented stories which always felt odd to me in a game where you control an empire's worth of soldiers and units. Having stories of individuals who couldn't have reached narrative heights without their armies behind them. I don't mean this in a bad way, but this usually doesn't end up feeling personal and interesting to me in the context of these games. But that doesn't mean that I don't love and appreciate these games. Quite the opposite, actually. I only brought this up because Homeworld's approach to storytelling is not character-oriented, but race-oriented? It sounds weird out of context, but basically even though the story has notable characters, they are only there to help us succeed in our journey. They play a pivotal role, but they are not the protagonists. Saying us beforehand was deliberate, since we are talking about the population of a planet called Karak, a desert world on the other rim of the galaxy, where a race called the Kushan is constantly fighting the harsh environment while looking for the debris of their unknown past. This search leads to the discovery of an ancient shipwreck buried in the great desert of Karak, with a guide stone located deep inside the wreckage, containing a map with the words Higara, their home planet originally. The discovery of their roots and homeworld unites the Kits, the Kushan clans, who start building a mothership capable of traversing through hyperspace based on the technology they retrieved from the Kartoba, the ancient spaceship found in the desert. This is where the grandeur and monumental nature of Homeworld's lore is set up, with a goal that would basically consume an average human life to just get started on, basically, since the mothership's construction is set to take 60 years. Its core will be Karan Sajet, who serves as a guiding hand throughout the story and dedicated her life to help the Kushan on their journey. After the construction is finished, the Kushan orbits the mothership in a scaffold in space while testing its functionality and providing you with a mandatory but immersive tutorial about the most basic mechanics of the game. This is followed by a test jump to the outskirts of the Karak system, where the mothership is supposed to rendezvous with a service vessel known as the Kar Salim. which traveled the same distance as us, but for 10 years using conventional drives. Basically, the rest of our journey depends on this meetup, since the Carcelim has the crew and tools required to perform fine-tuning on the mothership's engines and hyperspace module. Upon arrival though, the ship is nowhere to be found, and after a bit of investigation, only its wreckage turns up, alongside some unknown hostile fighters and corvettes. After salvaging the wreck and recovering a distress call they were unable to send, the mothership returns to Karak to receive maintenance and to get the cryotrays loaded, which contain the population of the planet chilling in cryosleep. Oh god, that was fucking terrible. Homeworld carefully and vaguely builds the story around you. You'll never know more than the bare essentials, which makes sense considering how you just ended up becoming part of the spacefaring civilizations. It's an entirely new world with endless possibilities. I always wanted to know more, simply because of all the mystery that surrounds this universe. What about the Carcelim? What's going to await us when we leave Karak for real? It's a slowly unfolding mystery that becomes bigger and bigger as you're jumping towards the center of the galaxy and meet new races like the Bentusi, who provide you with new technology and information about your adversaries, and also happen to be an integral part of something much bigger than we are. They are basically the drivers of the exposition train that's slowly cruising through the galaxy, constantly helping and guiding you. The others you meet are not exactly friendly. You are always against overwhelming odds, constantly building a way to keep up against your enemies. The story's strongest element is probably the fact that while doing so, you're sacrificing your own people, the remnants of your population, your entire race. Even if they are not an in-game resource, you get attached to ships that you've been able to carry with you on your journey. Having units that you built or salvaged in the early game survive the entire journey to Higara is such a great feeling that I was unable to experience in any other game. There is an almost XCOM-like connections with your units because of how the story makes you entirely dependent on them, with a resource pool that's incredibly limited in the early game. Your whole journey is an endurance test of self-preservation, tactical fuckwittery, and management, which requires you to make decisions on the fly because you won't be able to anticipate what's coming next. This adds a lot of flavor to the journey and the vastness of space where you battle your way through endless fleets and persevere through fights that you should not be able to survive. The pacing seems odd at first, with a build-up that seems hopeful and slow, but escalates into an in medias res slam dunk with a bunch of conflicts. Every mission of the game involves combat one way or another, but after mission 3, we get aboard the exposition train. Every mission you learn something new about your enemies or yourself, with a bigger focus on the former at first. Most of these story beats are delivered through black and white cutscenes between missions as the crew reflects on and analyzes what just happened exactly, and I love the way these are made and delivered. They do a great job at keeping a sense of uncertainty but also interest. Your involvement with the story starts at mission 3 for real, and it never lets up. It's because, as a protagonist, you sort of embody the whole Kushan race. Even though Karan, Sajet, and the Fleet Intelligence are definitely characters, they are just Santa's little helpers, while you are the big red man cruising through the sky in your banana-looking mothership sleigh.
Hey, the big man's back!
They direct you towards what you're supposed to do without giving you most of the hows. Their deliveries feel emotionless and straight to the point, which makes sense because one of them is basically the mothership's core, while the other has to stay composed and rational while guiding the remnants of a race through the galaxy. No pressure.
Something's wrong. We've been pulled out of hyperspace. We're still inside the nebula.
Understood.
It's a trap. Sensors detect hyperspace inhibitors in a triangular formation.
There are instances though where their talents shine as they struggle to hold back emotions upon coming across traumatic experiences. I'm gonna mention some of these later. The writing is masterful and mysterious, with dialogues that are brief but telling, without overwhelming the player. They are straight to the point, but not in a way that would result in underdeveloped story beats or dialogue. It's almost like information is held back from you, which is actually true in some cases, but it's clear that you are getting a sort of heads up throughout the story. The environment and its dangers are new, stakes are higher than you can imagine, and you are going to experience loss firsthand. And I'm gonna stop you for a brief second. Homeworld kicks into gears after a little incident right here, and if you never experienced it before, I would suggest playing the game beforehand. It's an extremely effective scene, and it hits me really hard to this day, but its effectiveness sort of depends on its twisty and unexpected nature. It happens in the first hour of the game, and it's not necessarily spoiler territory because it's part of the setup, but knowing about it beforehand could ruin your immersion. Skip here to be safe, otherwise you'll be warned. You're basically thrown into witnessing the aftermath of a genocide, while scrambling to save the remnants of your people in the cryo trace who are attacked by unknown hostiles. These are remnants of the Titan, an intergalactic empire that claims that we broke a treaty by venturing into hyperspace.
We are all that's left of our world, our culture, our people.
From the interrogation, we learned that a frontier fleet patrolling the borders of a vast interstellar empire was dispatched to destroy our planet. The captain claimed our people violated a 4,000-year-old treaty forbidding us to develop hyperspace technology. Extermination of our planet was the consequence. The subject did not survive interrogation.
After catching one of their frigates and retrieving its flight recorder, we'll have the opportunity to see what happened to Karak firsthand. I love this level. Even though it's one of the shortest ones in the game, it provides you with enough emotional drive to get immersed in the story. Never have I felt such a sense of anger and sadness at the same time towards people I don't even know. The mission's design is deliberate in every way possible. At first you can only see the ruins of the scaffold, but when you pan to the left, Karak is gonna be in front of you. Full-on Premiere Plan, with its atmosphere burning up. And as you're scrambling to save the remnants of your people from unknown forces, which take a lot of time to kill, you'll witness it step by step. It's an extremely brutal setup that paints a clear picture of what our adversaries are truly capable of. Immersion is also facilitated by the fact that you have to wait and load up the cryo trays individually, letting the revelation slowly sink in about your people. All we have left is just a few 100,000 of them. Losing a cryo tray means losing 100,000 people. Yes, you heard me right. In game context, it only seems to be just a number, a statistic, but the brutality of the scene drives home the tragedy incredibly well. And with the experience fresh in their minds, the Kushan decides to fight back and hunt down the fleet that caused the demise of their home planet. After of which, course to the homeworld is set through even more hardships. And with that, we're hyperspace jumping into the spoiler reaches. I'm gonna talk about the plot and spoil the ending, be warned.
Hyperspace initiated. All ships auto-launching. Hyperdrive jump failed.
I can see that you're still here, even though I told you to be aware of spoilers. Okay, one more second for you. Thank you, I appreciate that. Homeworld juggles a few factions, and these are really easy to keep track of. The first enemy faction you'll have to face are the Tyrannic Raiders, space pirates under the Titan paycheck. They were the ones who destroyed the Carcelim. On Karak, you glance at the Titan themselves who destroyed the planet using a weaponized atmosphere deprivation device. At first I wasn't really blown away how the game utilized these factions, with the Titan being a de facto evil empire and the Tyrannic Raiders being paid goons. After Mission 6 though, when you venture into a nebula to avoid the Titan who are apparently scared shitless of the damn thing, the game opens up with its story a bit. The nebula is home to the Kadashians. No, not those. An elusive race of warriors who worship the nebula and claim that you defiled the gardens of Kadesh, a place in it, in turn asking you to join them or...
If you will not join, then die. There is no withdrawal from the garden.
What a nice bunch. They use hyperdrive inhibitors to capture ships passing through the nebula. They are pirates, right? Yeah, you would think that, but they also seem to have similarities with you on a mechanical level. It's almost like the ship you traveled to Karak with so many years ago shares a similar It's the same ship. They are the same bunch as the Kushan. Upon confronting them with this knowledge though, they will simply not comply. They want you to stay and keep their hideout as a secret so the evildoers cannot harm them. Letting us just walk out of there would result in us failing our quest in Homecoming, exposing them in the process. At least, that's what they think before starting their final, destined to fail assault on you. This is only 2 missions worth of plot and there is an incredible sense of cold acceptance towards it. You basically murdered another group of your people. They didn't give you much of a choice, but still. Homeworld does wonders with moments like this, and I have a hard time describing how. I think it's due to how vague the narrative is about most of your encounters. The game shows and tells a bit, leaving you with lots of questions afterwards. Also, not to mention the things it demands you to do, like the previously mentioned destruction of Kardashian forces. You stumble across weird phenomena all the time and it's just not explained. It still feels cohesive and part of a galaxy that you just know absolutely nothing about. That's why the build-up about how evil and dangerous the Taiidan is works incredibly well. You're slowly putting together how great of a foe they actually are, but as you're moving through the galaxy, constantly cutting through their defenses and coming out on top in almost all situations, that view goes down the drain. It is intentional to succeed in so many battles, since one of the game's important plot points is that a rebellion gets unveiled to you, spearheaded by Captain Elson, a member of the Taiidan Elite Guard. He describes the Empire as a decadent and corrupt shell of its former self, but it still feels a tad bit weird to be able to defeat the strongest empire in the galaxy all the time. You always find a weak link in their defenses one way or another, and never have to escape from them. This is something, in my opinion, that the expansion Cataclysm and Homeworld 2 do so much better. Stakes feel a lot higher to me in those ones, and you might even have to pull an emergency hyperspace jump in Cataclysm, making you leave units behind. I feel like moments like that could have emphasized the scale and how dangerous of a foe the Taiidan are. Just look at these stations. These would have had us for breakfast. Homeworld has a few filler moments like Mission 6 that's basically you cutting through an asteroid field to meet the Bentusi at the end. Same with Mission 9, where you disable a ghost ship to get some new research topics and meet the Bentusi again to drop some exposition on your ass. I feel like, in the context of the story, these levels, especially Mission 6, could have been used a lot better, because they don't provide you with interesting story beats or gameplay either. The ghost ship level Sea of Lost Souls does have some unique gameplay tricks up its sleeve, but the ship itself is basically just a plot device to get you to talk to the Bentusi for a second. They go on about bringing our concerns to the council about the Taiidan, but that's about it. Diamond Shoals, Mission 6, is the same in this regard, where their only input is the fact that the nebula is a scary place. This is where my complaints towards the story end. I didn't mean to downplay the importance of the Bentusi, who basically serve as the exposition dealers, hanging outside your crib and hooking you up with the sweet, sweet story beats. Ooh. Sorry, I got sidetracked there for a second. The Bentusi also play a pivotal role in helping you discovering your origin story. After saving them from a Taiidan ambush which was orchestrated as a means to stop them from exposing Taiidan crimes against you, they show you what happened exactly all those years ago. After losing a war against the Taiidan thousands of years before, the Kushan's only chance of survival was a mass outcry for mercy, which was accepted by the victors, but in turn it also meant the exile of the entire race. Without any help or guidance, the exiles set out to make their journey on conventional drives into the depths of space. The journey itself was one that had to be started as soon as possible, resulting in technical difficulties and uncertainty regarding their final destination. Many ships were destroyed due to malfunctions, and a huge chunk of the population splintered off to find refuge in the nebula. With only just a few ships remaining, the final destination of the exiles became Karak, the desert planet where they lived for a good 1,000 of years, before rediscovering their roots later on, first through scientific means, then with the accidental discovery of the Kartoba. It's weird how impactful a simple TED talk about one's past can be. The Bentusi lay their cards on the table with that maneuver, showing us that they are indeed trying to help us. Again, Homeworld tells, not just shows, but it relies more on the latter. I find this to be one of the reasons that it has a wealth of effective scenes, like the aforementioned exile, that serves as the background to understand why we are here at the first place. Armed with this knowledge and a fleet strong enough to chew up the most dangerous of the Empire's output, the Kushan crush most of the Taiidan opposition, who resort to extremely cheap methods to keep you far away from Higara, like setting a motorized asteroid on the mothership's collision course after dragging her out of hyperspace. Yeah, and it almost hit me this time I was playing. Wow. The quote-unquote main antagonist of the story is the Taiidan Empire, but he isn't that noteworthy of a character. He serves more as an embodiment of the Empire's cruelty with his, 5 or so sentences in the entire game. He also attempts to kill Karan Sajet in a cutscene, the house of which I don't understand to this day because it happens in hyperspace through a transmission and Oh. This just happens before the final battle in the game, where the Taiidan attempts to overwhelm you from multiple sides. The Emperor's trick works really well since the game suggests that our fleet remains uncoordinated without Karen. However, you receive reinforcements from the Resistance and Captain Elson, who charge headfirst against the Tide M mothership. This battle puts everything to the test that you have learned throughout the game. It requires lots of planning and tactical insight to not get continuously overwhelmed by the Tide M. After defeating the Emperor, the Bentusi show up with the Galactic Council alongside them. Our cause and journey was brought in front of them, and they granted us the Homeworld. The war is over, and you have a chance to take a look at the beautiful Higara, as its populace destroyed the remnants of the old empire and a period of peace and growth comes. The journey was long and arduous, but now you are home. We are home. It's absolutely beautiful, isn't it? It's the perfect ending to a long trek through space. A well-deserved one at that. It doesn't feel forced or unfulfilling in any way possible. This is exactly what you fought for and worked hard for. It also leaves a lot open for potential sequels to fill out since the future is unsure. Whoa, you're back, spoiler dodgers. As a means to sum up my feelings over Homeworld's story, all I'm gonna say is that Homeworld is an immensely tragic but also incredibly beautiful tale of perseverance and self-discovery. I feel like there was a clear vision in mind upon drafting the story. It tackles topics like genocide in such an incredibly mature way that is just outstanding. There are instances where it deviates from its course to focus on showing bits and pieces from the galaxy to deepen its mythos and gigantic timeline of events. While I didn't like some levels in terms of their way of progressing the story, the overall experience is so damn incredible that I just have a hard time finding any sort of flaw when it comes to the setting, lore, and the story in general. But it's not just the story that's captivating about Homeworld, but the gameplay as well. This is due to the fact that both are intertwined in an almost romantic way. You control the Kushan mothership on its journey through the galaxy, using it to build a majestic fleet capable of cutting through any opposition. Your battles will happen in open space in a fully 3D environment with 360 degrees of freedom. In cases like this, questions about level design come up, like how do you establish choke points and scripted sequences. Homeworld does a great job at guiding you through levels. When you enter a new area, your objective gets highlighted in the Sensors Manager, where you can see the entire layout of the level. This is where you can plan out your moves. You can move units around in normal view, but in the manager you can set up longer distances for them. In both scenarios, you are able to change the elevation as well by holding down shift and moving the mouse. This is gonna be necessary since your enemies are gonna be hiding in different sections of the map in different altitudes, so to say. Since you are unable to pan the screen in the original game, the sensors are your only means to jump between units that are far away from each other. It sounds a bit backhanded, but it works intuitively enough. It feels restrictive at first, but I feel like it adds to the overall feeling of how vast space is and how much you are unable to see of it, as weird as it sounds. The difficulty of a level is usually defined by the obstacles you have to go through in order to reach and destroy enemy ships. There is a supernova level, for example, where your ships have to follow a path through dust clouds in order to stay shielded from radiation. In other cases, you might have a hard time gathering resources because enemies are constantly hindering your progress. You gotta protect your important ships at all costs. How do you do that? You have different fighters, corvettes, frigates, capital ships, super capital ships, and also additional miscellaneous units at your disposal as well. Early on, you'll have to rely on the first two categories, the ships of which are dependent on fuel. If you fly about with them for a long time, they run out of fuel, and in turn they become slower and more vulnerable. You can avoid this by docking ships in the mothership or other support vessels which repair and fuel them up for the next assignment. Managing fuel will become second nature after a while though. You will learn when it is appropriate to dock and how to time it basically. Homeworld's units behave in a rock, paper, scissors kind of way, meaning that each category has units that are able to destroy different kinds of ships. The line is blurred when it comes to what is effective against what specifically. You have to mix and match to be the most effective, but if we go with the standards, bombers in the fighter category are great against frigates, and also capital ships to an extent. The assault frigate and the missile destroyer, a capital ship, are great against fighters and corvettes. That doesn't mean that a fuck ton of heavy corvettes cannot destroy corvettes, or that a missile destroyer is not effective against capital ships. You can always cook something up and adapt based on the opposing ships, and that's vital to your survival, considering how the enemy always has the upper hand. If all their units converged on you in the beginning of a mission, the homecoming expedition would be rather short. Not letting them regroup and engaging them in smaller chunks is vital to your success. There is no difficulty slider since the game uses an adaptive system that scales the difficulty based on the numbers of ships you have upon starting the level. The system makes sure that the enemy is always in an advantage considering its numbers, but at the same time you're never in such a disadvantage that a level would be impossible to complete. Quite the contrary actually. Every battle feels balanced and maybe even simple, if you're smart. I'm not. The system seems to behave differently in Classic and the remastered versions. Classic seems to utilize less units that are more durable and hit harder, while the remastered throws more in your way that are easier to dispose of, making battles look more epic, I suppose. The units were rebalanced and tweaked somewhat, and I have to say that playing the remastered feels a lot easier for this reason. Fighters and corvettes feel less effective against frigates and capital ships, but the latter feels so incredibly strong that the game loses most of its difficulty near the endgame. You are basically cutting through enemy lines like I do through vinyl packaging. As I said, having a varied fleet is important, since you have to be prepared for every possible way the enemy can attack. They use a gravity well generator to immobilize your fighters. Use your big ass anti-capital ships to cook it. They use cloaking devices to hide a small group of ships in order to ambush you. Proximity sensors can see through them. You don't want to send resource collectors into an undiscovered asteroid belt? Use probes or scouts to check first. Think of your fleet as a Swiss army knife. Or just a big ass cheese grater that is about to shred some space mozzarella on top of your galaxy-za. What the actual fuck are they putting in these?
Putting chemicals in the water.
You also have the aforementioned resource collectors that mine asteroids for space bread, and also resource controllers that serve as mobile refineries, meaning that you don't have to haul the prize back to the mothership. It does the refining process on the spot instead. There is also a research ship that's required for you to make dinner. No, you dummy, it's for research. You lost focus. Get back in the saddle. Jeez. There are different topics to research, each providing you with the ability to build a new unit afterwards. You can simultaneously research the same amount of topics as the number of research ships you have. One is enough, you'll need the resources if you play the OG. Research takes time, but it won't cost you any resources to do so in Classic. The Remastered will charge you for it Homeworld 2 style. The number of resources, however, are increased accordingly in this version as well. Also, a quality of life improvement that's been added was the automatic collection of resources before finishing a level. This removes a nuisance I had with the original version, which is the fact that I had to manually collect all the remaining asteroids and gases on the map. This is non-existent now. You click hyperspace at the end of the mission and everything gets collected automatically. The problem isn't with this system, but with the increased resource pool. After playing both versions straight after each other, starting with the remastered, I found the original to be a lot stingier with resources. I always had enough but never an overabundance of them, requiring me to constantly go for those faraway asteroids and gather them sneakily. In the remastered, this stopped happening after missions 7 or 8, around halfway through the game. Some levels require you to pull some tricks to reach resources, like the previously mentioned Supernova mission where venturing out of a dust cloud will damage your ships. In the remastered, I didn't need to plan accordingly because I was richety rich and was able to battle my way through the level with minimal losses. And at the end, I clicked hyperspace and the resources were collected. This is just one small nitpick out of the bunch. The remaster itself is a great addition to the series, don't get me wrong, but probably due to its development with a modified Homeworld 2 engine, things didn't go as smooth as intended. A few key elements of the game have been tweaked, like salvaging. And now, the best unit in the game. The salvage corvette.
The first day I got me a fuel pump, and the next day I got me an engine and a trunk.
Just look at it, it's like, it's about to give you a hug. Its wholesomeness ends there though, because you will use it to capture enemy ships for yourself. Yes, every enemy ship. You might need more corvettes for the bigger ones though. Salvaging plays a pivotal role in Homeworld's gameplay. You see, resources are limited in each level, meaning that you're gonna have to survive on the bread you hoarded up for yourself. Therefore, getting units without building costs,
It's free real estate.
especially considering there are numerous ships that cannot be built. Capturing those is crucial, like the multi-beam frigates of the Kardashians. They are fast, agile, and do lots of damage. Salvaging enemy ships is a risk-reward maneuver, simply because the enemy can see you while doing it. They usually focus their units on your salvage corvettes when you're attempting to steal one of their ships. It's something you can do a lot with unusual units, but the Titan are trickier to capture. The remaster encourages salvaging to a point where you can capture almost every super capital ship that comes your way. I feel like the AI was tweaked in the remaster since enemy units seem to be a lot more forgiving. My sweet salvage corvettes aren't in as big of a danger, and the fleet I preserved till the end kinda shows that. One of the most dangerous things in classic Homeworld is when two big groups of enemies converge on your location, meaning that you're gonna get overpowered. This doesn't seem to happen in the remaster that much, and not to mention the few AI hiccups that I stumbled across either. The enemy just feels dumber in a way. My final nitpick with the remaster is the changes they made to the formations and tactics. You see, the original Homeworld has a system where you can set the formation of your selected units. You can choose from presets, and all of them work in a different way. Using X formation with fighters and corvettes upon attacking, for example, is quite effective. The same applies to wall formation with ion frigates and capital ships. My favorite, however, is sphere. It's quite effective since your units cover the target in a sphere-like formation, hence the name. This provides you with an opportunity to constantly keep units under fire while maintaining distance and position. It also works incredibly well while guarding a ship for the same reasons. Tactics, on the other hand, provide you with different options to tackle enemies with. You can choose between aggressive, normal, and evasive, with aggressive being
If you don't gonna get your head kicked in.
and evasive being. I never resorted to using normal because if I wanted to keep on shooting while changing positions, I could still do that in aggressive. But if I wanted to dip out of a situation that went haywire quite fast, evasive was always the way to go. I just didn't need the middle ground, okay, I like the extremes. When it comes to the remaster, however, I would like to bitch for a final time. Sphere formation doesn't seem to work as intended for me, and while the tactics are functional and work well, the devs added an extra behavior option which is supposed to do the same thing as the tactics settings, I guess, but it's next to the tactics tab. I don't really see an impact when I change these about, so I usually just set them to the same as my currently used tactics. I just don't understand why I have two options that basically result in the same outcome, and why can I set them up in a way that's just not useful. Now that I bitched about the remastered, I feel like I should give it some well-deserved praise. The UI in the original game was quite minimal, and while I liked the immersion that it provided, new players don't get to know crucial information about some of their ships. Like, how do you use the healing functionality of the support frigates and repair corvettes? The remastered highlights special abilities with their own buttons in the bottom left corner when special units are selected. It's easy to read and straight to the point. It also gives you more info about the units you fight against, like their actual hit points. The option to be able to pan the screen is also much appreciated. In the original, you are stuck with your own units. You can't look at other sections of the map unless a unit is there. I know that my complaints sort of painted a negative picture about the remastered, but that's simply because of how well the original Homeworld has aged. The remastered is still a great version to play, simply due to how it streamlines and simplifies aspects of the original without watering it down. You still have the same mechanics, but they are constantly in front of you, so as a newcomer you'll always know what to click, and you don't have to go through drop-down menus to get to know shortcuts and all that. It's a good introduction to the series if you are someone new. As I said, it's easier to navigate, it's friendlier, and it's also prettier. Boy, it's pretty. I love how the remastered version looks, especially the lighting. I feel like it's a beautiful recreation of Homeworld, and also a faithful one at that. That's why I've been bothering you with these jump cuts actually, so you can see the legit improvements from a graphical standpoint. While the original is definitely outdated from today's perspective, there is an incredible charm to the way it looks. It's blocky, but also elegant and detailed with all the little lights on ships, the decals, the effects. Ship designs are really inventive and interesting in my opinion, especially the Kushan mothership. People in the Homeworld community kinda meme it as like a banana. It doesn't resemble a banana in my opinion, but anyways, that's people can say whatever they want on the internet. By the way, in the original version of the game you can actually choose whether you'd like to play as the Kushan or the Taidan. You can even customize the color scheme of the ships, that's why my fleet ended up looking purple in the OG playthrough. Considering the designs, Taidan ships are more elegant and symmetrical, while the Kushan ones are more utilitarian looking, which makes sense considering their background. While the Kushan is the canon pick, your decision has no impact on the story, it's just the name and the looks. Ships are distinctive in their looks when it comes to the Kushan and the Taidan. Their functionality, however, is the same. Both races have the same units, they just look different. But it's not just the ships that you're gonna be looking at throughout all this, but space as well. The original Homeworld's backdrops, while definitely not as high resolution as the remasters, still look charming and detailed. Both versions' renditions of space is beautiful. When you leave the nebula, you can actually see it behind the mothership in the distance, and it's great. There's no point in denying that the remastered backgrounds are more beautiful and picturesque though. There is a giant scope to your journey that you can feel on your skin. This feeling of monumentalism is also emphasized by the incredible music. Both releases share the same music, with the remastered score sounding more crisp, dynamic and detailed since no compression was applied to it, since it wasn't required to fit it on a CD. Homeworld's music shares a lot with the previous games I reviewed. There is a focus on ambient tracks and classical music with the occasional percussion-heavy combat music that sounds tribal and alien. The ambient pieces are going to be your comfort tracks for the most of the time. Fuck! The ambient pieces are going to be your comfort tracks for most of the time while you're just organizing your units or preparing your moves. The classical pieces usually come up when there is an event of significance to further highlight its effectiveness, and trust me, these are incredibly effective, especially this game's version of Adagio for strings. This rendition is a special bean in a way that is really hard for me to put in words. It is able to encapsulate so many different feelings at once: hope, glory, but also sadness and insignificance. It truly is the perfect piece to accompany the mothership on her launch or her final departure from Karak. The music is always fitting. You never have a feeling that it's trying to force a reaction out of you or that it's powerless and it just doesn't belong. It snugly cuddles up with the scene that is currently unfolding in front of you. It's not only the music portion of the audio department that I enjoy thoroughly, but the ship and space sounds too. All your units have a very distinctive hum or other noise to them that sort of gives away what faction they belong to. Their depth and volume also increase with the size of the ships. It just adds a further layer of personality to your units. To me personally, Homeworld is one of those games where every small puzzle piece that makes up its entirety has a sort of reinforcing effect on the others. The visceral fights for survival and perseverance are emphasized by the urgent and desperate nature of the story, which is further fueled by every bit of the presentation, like the atmospheric ambience and the hectic tribal battle themes. Or just the overall scary vastness of space. Every aspect of it is thought out and deliberate, showing so much bravery from a design standpoint that it's just mind-blowing. It's one of those games that I consider to be a technical marvel and a jaw-dropping piece of art at the same time. It is always able to bring tears to my eyes whenever I finish it. The beginning just breaks me every time as well. It's a powerful artistic statement, a game that has stuck with me since I was a child. Something I always had a special connection with, even before I was able to understand its themes and message. As I grew older and learned a lot more about the English language, coming to understand what the game is about, I started thinking that it has a special message for me in a way. A message about self-discovery and the hardships that one has to face in order to get to the point of becoming the best possible version of themselves. It's a game that made me realize how difficult it is to understand myself and what my aspirations are in life, as I was sort of pointed towards a career that I don't feel comfortable in as I'm marching towards my final destination. Now I'm in a state of panic and uncertainty about how to gather and utilize my strengths in a way that would keep me afloat, basically. Heck, even my strengths seem to evade me from time to time. Even before all of this, and the cascade of mental health troubles that I'm currently in, Homeworld was a companion in the most turbulent times of my life. Always showing me that getting to know yourself will sometimes require you to tread through the mud, the uncertainty, but you will eventually come out as a new person with a changed perspective. Most importantly, someone stronger and better. It is going to be tremendously hard to find your own path, quote-unquote home, but you'll eventually get to that point in life. I know that this might sound corny and all, but for me, the mindset was always the most ambiguous aspect of mental health. It's really easy to get stuck and keep on rolling in the mud of our own self-hate and insecurity. The fact that a game was able to make me understand that having these difficulties won't make me a weaker person meant a lot to me, and it still does in my early 20s. While I still didn't get around to building my own mothership, I'm still constantly trying to become a better version of myself, and Homeworld played a pivotal role in all this, for which I am eternally grateful. I'm thankful to Relic that they made this series of beautiful video games, and I'm thankful to Gearbox for saving it from becoming lost as abandonware. I never expected to thank Gearbox for anything, but I guess that's something. If you're interested in playing Homeworld and seeing it for yourself, I included links for you in the description where you can buy it in a state that's playable from the get-go. Getting the remastered collection means that you get Homeworld 1 and 2, both in classic and remastered form. So it's an absolutely great deal, not to mention that it goes on sale pretty often. And with that, I would like to thank you for taking the time to watch me ramble about this game. It means a lot. And I'm going to review the other Homeworld games in the future as well, so if you feel like subscribing, I appreciate that. The same applies to commenting and leaving a like or dislike. Even if it's just you telling me that watermelons are overrated, that shit's cool, I appreciate that. And with that, I'm signing off to set foot on Higara once again. Thank you for watching.